Hi friends, Miss Ashlee, librarian at the Crystal Lake Public Library here today for another Blow Off Some Steam. We're going to do some copper reactions today that I got out of a book called S.T.E.A.M Lab. Let's get started. Okay, today we're going to do 3 different copper reactions and we are going to get started. We have vinegar, distilled vinegar, which it's a weak acid, so it won't hurt you if it gets on your skin, but it would hurt if it gets in your eyes, so be careful with that. I have table salt. I have 10 pennies, just regular pennies, and I have a glass bowl. What we're gonna do, and I'm gonna keep one of my 10 pennies out to show you what happens, the difference. I'm gonna put the 9 other pennies in this bowl. And the pennies themselves are not made out of copper, but they are coated in copper. And I'm going to pour enough distilled vinegar in to cover over the pennies here in my glass bowl. And vinegar contains a chemical called acetic acid, which will react with the pennies. Now I'm going to stir in a teaspoon of salt. Salt's made of the elements sodium and chlorine. So I'm gonna stir it up a little bit, try to get some of the salt to dissolve in the vinegar. And then I'm going to leave the pennies in the salt and vinegar for 10 minutes, and then we'll see what they look like. All right, it's been actually about 30 minutes that our pennies have been soaking in this vinegar and salt solution. And I had some pretty dirty pennies, so you can see some of them are still, that one right there, I think it's still working. However, this one right here looks pretty shiny to me. And we can contrast that with the one that we didn't put in the solution. So you can see that the vinegar took those oxygen atoms off of the copper atom covering of our penny on the right, and they have stayed on our penny in the left, and you can see the very difference. So how did this work? Well, everything around us is made up of tiny particles called atoms. And atoms of different kinds, elements, join together in different ways, forming compounds. In a chemical reaction, atoms can separate, swap partners, form new compounds. So pennies are shiny when they're new, but they turn dull and brown over time because the copper atoms react with oxygen atoms from the air to form a compound called copper oxide. So when we put the vinegar with the acetic acid and the salt in there, they react with the copper oxide, stripping it from the pennies and revealing the shiny layer of pure copper that coats the penny underneath. The salt speeds up the reaction. So the orange represents the copper atoms. The red represents the oxygen atoms that go around the pennies, you know, and make them the dull color. And then when we put vinegar in, it's gonna react and it's gonna basically pick up these red atoms and take it away, and then we're gonna be left with just the copper atoms on the surface of the coin. All right, so I've taken the pennies out of my glass bowl with the vinegar. And so the next reaction that I'm gonna do is I am gonna take a steel nail and I am going to place it down in to the solution, and I am going to leave it for about 20 minutes, and the nail should change colors. So we'll wait and see if that happens. Okay, we're back. It's actually been about 30 minutes. And I am going to take the nail that was in the vinegar, salt, and leftovers from the penny solution, and I'm gonna bring it out. And I'm going to move it. So you can see the one on the left just came out of the solution, and the one on the right is what it looked like before. I would say for me that this experiment was a little bit of a fail. What should have happened is the nail would have come out copper plated. You can see it changed color from there to there. I don't think that this one looks very copper plated, and I'm not sure why, but what should have happened, and maybe I'll trust this a little bit later and try again, is that the solution where it took off all of those, oxygen atoms earlier, it did take off some of the copper. You can see my picture from earlier. Some of the orange did go into the vinegar solution. So what would happen is when I put the nail into it, the copper atoms that were floating around should have attached to this nail. Now, I'm gonna be honest. I could not find an ungalvanized steel nail. I found some steel nails. I don't know if the ungalvanized or galvanized made a difference, and that might be the case. So now on to reaction number 3. Okay, the third and final reaction we're going to do today is to make copper chloride. And we're gonna use the pennies that we fished out earlier. I have them on my paper towel in a plastic bowl. And I'm going to, you can see it's a little bit wet with the vinegar earlier. So I'm gonna put a little bit more in on top of it. The directions say to soak the paper towel with the vinegar. So I have definitely done that. And then we're going to spoon some salt on top of each penny until it's covered. And now we have to be very patient for this one. We've got to leave it for about 1 to 2 hours. And then when we come back, we'll see what happens to it. Okay, these are our pennies after about 2 hours. And you can see, I think right up here, we're getting most of the reaction. So there's a green coating of copper chloride on it. You can see it there. Now, how does that work? Well, the chemical reaction takes place here. Salt is made of elements of sodium and chlorine, right? And the chlorine reacts with the copper, producing a chemical called basic copper chloride, which has a bright blue-green color. So again, I did these reactions from the S.T.E.A.M lab book. We have it here at the library, and there are lots of other cool things you can do in there. Hope you have a good spring break, and we'll see you next time on Blow Off Some Steam. Thanks.